Every family has this argument. Maybe at a dinner table, maybe at a wedding, maybe in a WhatsApp group that gets way too heated for a Tuesday evening. One uncle swears by real estate. Been saying it for 30 years. They're not making more land. Property always goes up. Rent pays your mortgage. Stocks are gambling. Another cousin fires back with the index fund speech. Warren Buffett said, put everything in the S&P 500. Real estate is illiquid. It's a headache. Tenants destroy your property and stop paying rent. Both of them are completely convinced. Both of them have real examples to back their position, and both of them are missing something important. Because this debate, real estate versus stocks, is one of the most argued financial topics on the planet, and it almost always generates more heat than light because everyone is comparing different numbers, different time periods, different versions of each investment, and drawing universal conclusions from personal experience. So today we're going to do something that almost nobody actually does in this debate. We're going to run the real math, side by side. Same money, same starting point, no cheerleading for either side. Just the honest numbers, including the parts that real estate promoters quietly leave out and the parts that stock market evangelists conveniently forget to mention. By the end of this, you won't just have an opinion. You'll have a framework. Here's why this debate never gets resolved properly. Both sides argue from feeling rather than complete calculation. And both feelings are based on real but incomplete information. The real estate camp looks at a house bought for $180,000 that is now worth $420,000 and calls that a victory. They see a tangible asset, something real, something they can drive past and point at, something that generated rental income the whole time and is now worth more than double. That feels unambiguously like winning. The stock market camp looks at the S&P 500 returning an average of roughly 10% annually over the last several decades and says, the math speaks for itself. Consistent, compounding, no tenants, no toilets, no maintenance calls at midnight. Just numbers going up. What both sides are doing is picking the calculation that supports their conclusion and stopping there. The real estate person forgot to calculate the interest paid on the mortgage, the property taxes paid every year, the maintenance costs, the periods of vacancy, the insurance, the transaction costs of buying and selling. When you add those back in, the return looks meaningfully different. The stock market person forgot to account for the leverage available in real estate, the ability to control a $400,000 asset with $80,000 of your own money, and what that leverage does to actual cash on cash. Returns when it's working in your favor. Both calculations, done incompletely, tell a misleading story. So let's do them completely. Let's give both investors the same starting capital. $80,000. Same person, same moment, two parallel universes. Universe 1, real estate. In this universe, our investor, call him Ray, uses his $80,000 as a 20% down payment on a $400,000 rental property. He takes a 30-year mortgage at 7% interest on the remaining $320,000. His monthly mortgage payment is approximately $1,230. He rents the property for $2,600 a month. On paper, that's $470 positive cash flow per month before expenses. Now, the real numbers, property tax in a typical market runs around $400 a month. Insurance is roughly $150. Maintenance and repairs average about $200 a month when calculated annually, and that's conservative, especially as the property ages. Vacancy. Even a good rental sits empty. Occasionally, accounts for roughly 1 month per year, which averages to another $215 monthly loss. Real monthly cash flow after realistic expenses. Approximately negative $4,995 a month. Ray is subsidizing this property by about $500 monthly out of his own pocket. But here's what Ray does have. He has an asset that historically appreciates at a conservative 3.5% annual appreciation, lower than many markets but reasonable nationally. His $400,000 property becomes approximately $565,000 after 10 years. He also has equity building from mortgage paydown. After 10 years, he's paid down roughly $44,000 of principal. His equity position, $245,000 in a property worth $565,000. His total out-of-pocket over 10 years, $80,000 down payment plus $500 monthly subsidy for 120 months. That's $60,000 additional cash out. Total invested, $140,000. Total equity after 10 years, roughly $245,000. Net gain on $140,000 invested, approximately $105,000 over a decade. Universe 2, stocks. In this universe, our investor, call her Sarah, takes the same $80,000 and invests it in a broad market index fund. She also takes the $500 per month that Ray was subsidizing his rental property and invests that too, because she doesn't have a mortgage to cover. $80,000 invested upfront plus $500 per month continuously for 10 years, at the historical average return of 10% annually. After 10 years, Sarah's portfolio is worth approximately $362,000. Her total invested, $80,000 plus $60,000 in monthly contributions. Same $140,000 as Ray. Net gain on $140,000 invested, approximately $222,000. Same starting capital, same additional monthly commitment. 10 years later, Ray has $105,000 in gains, tied up in an illiquid asset he needs to sell or refinance to access, with ongoing management responsibilities. Sarah has $222,000 in gains, fully liquid, no phone calls from tenants, no repair bills accessible with a few clicks. In this comparison, stocks win significantly. Before the real estate people close the video, stay with me, because the comparison above used one specific scenario, and real estate has conditions under which it absolutely demolishes the stock market. The scenario above assumed Ray's market appreciated conservatively, and his cash flow was negative. Change two variables and the outcome shifts dramatically. Variable 1, cash flow positive markets. In certain cities and property types, rent-to-price ratios allow for genuinely positive cash flow after all expenses, sometimes $600 to $900 monthly profit. If Ray's property generates $700 monthly net instead of negative $500, his 10-year picture looks completely different. Now he's collecting income and building equity simultaneously. Variable 2, higher appreciation markets. In cities like Austin, Miami, or Phoenix over the last decade, $400,000 properties didn't appreciate 3.5% annually. They appreciated 7%, 8%, sometimes more. In those markets, real estate returns have substantially outperformed stock market averages over the same period. Variable 3, leverage amplification. The stock market doesn't let you control $400,000 of assets with $80,000. Real estate does. When appreciation is strong, that leverage multiplies your actual return on invested capital in ways that an unleveraged stock portfolio simply cannot match. 10% return on $400,000 of real estate is $40. So gain on $80,000 of your own money. A 50% cash-on-cash return. So the honest answer to which one wins is genuinely, it depends on which real estate and which period. Here's the deeper truth that makes this entire debate somewhat beside the point. The question isn't really which asset class is superior. The question is which one you will actually execute well. And those are completely different questions. Real estate rewards specific skills and temperaments. You need to be able to analyze deals accurately, find the right markets, manage tenants or manage property managers, handle the operational complexity of a physical asset, and stomach the illiquidity. Done well by someone with those capabilities in the right market, real estate creates extraordinary wealth. Done poorly, over-leveraged, in a flat market with bad tenants, in an area with declining demand, it destroys wealth just as spectacularly. Index fund investing rewards a completely different set of qualities: consistency, patience, the emotional discipline not to sell during market downturns when every instinct says run. Done well, meaning done boringly and consistently for decades, the stock market has made ordinary people with ordinary incomes financially free. Done poorly, panic selling, chasing hot stocks, trying to time the market, it produces the same mediocre results as any other poorly executed strategy. The wealthiest people in the world almost universally own both. They use real estate for leverage, cash flow, and tax advantages. They use equities for liquidity, diversification, and low-maintenance compounding. They don't argue about which is better. They understand what each one does well and use each accordingly. The debate is a poor person's argument, not because poor people have it, but because it's the kind of binary thinking that characterizes a financial mindset that hasn't yet. expanded to see that the two aren't competitors. They're tools. 3 things worth understanding clearly before you make any decision here. 1. Run the complete math before you romanticize either option. For real estate, include mortgage interest, taxes, insurance, maintenance, vacancy, and transaction costs before calculating your real return. For stocks, include your actual emotional ability to stay, invested through 30 and 40%, drawdowns without selling. The theoretical return and the return you'll actually experience can be very different numbers. 2. Match the vehicle to your actual situation. If you have $30,000 saved in a full-time job you can't leave, a rental property requiring active management in a distant city is not the right tool for you right now. Index fund investing is low friction and accessible at any income level. Real estate makes more sense when you have sufficient capital, time, local market knowledge, and risk tolerance for illiquidity. 3. Think about these as phases rather than permanent choices. Many financially successful people start with index funds, building liquid capital efficiently with minimal complexity, and add real estate later when they have the capital base, knowledge, and bandwidth to execute it well. The sequence matters as much as the choice. Subscribe to Real Veil Studios for more of this kind of honest financial breakdown. No hype, no agenda, just the real math behind the decisions that actually determine your financial future. Hit subscribe and share this with whoever is currently losing the real estate versus stocks argument at your family dinner table. The uncle who swears by real estate isn't wrong. The cousin who quotes Warren Buffett isn't wrong either. They're both describing real outcomes from real strategies that have genuinely built wealth for real people across multiple generations. What they're both missing is the complete picture. The hidden costs on one side, the leverage advantages on the other, the markets and time periods that favor each, the personal execution requirements that determine whether any strategy produces its theoretical return or something well below it. The most expensive financial decision you can make isn't choosing real estate over stocks or stocks over real estate. It's choosing an argument over an education. Stop defending an asset class. Start understanding both of them clearly enough to use whichever one fits your specific situation, capital level, and capabilities right now. The money doesn't care which side of the debate you're on. It just goes to the people who understand the math.